And we have some news that is just coming in where India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has had a 30-minute-long telephonic conversation with US President Donald Trump. The two leaders discussed a range of bilateral issues, including Kashmir. Prime Minister Modi has made it clear that the anti-India rhetoric being used by leaders in South Asia was not conducive to peace. He has also reiterated that India's commitment to peace and fight against poverty. Other issues included terror and trade. Prime Minister Modi also said that India was committed to peace and stability in Afghanistan. A 30-minute-long phone conversation between Narendra Modi and Trump, of which we have the details, in which the Indian Prime Minister has made it clear that anti-India rhetoric needs to stop. Keep in mind, this is a conversation between the President of the United States of America and the Prime Minister of India, just 2 weeks after the historic decision by India on Kashmir. And Kashmir was discussed by Donald Trump and Narendra Modi. Narendra Modi telling Donald Trump that leaders in South Asia's anti-India rhetoric needs to find a full stop. We have our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibbal now joining us live with more details on it. Siddhant, this is a very important conversation, the first conversation after the abrogation of Article 370 in Kashmir.
Well, yes, a very important conversation between the Indian Prime Minister and the US President, and we know this conversation coming in the backdrop of, remember, the Pakistani Prime Minister also calling the US President on Friday, hoping to sway decision of the Americans at the UNSC consultative meeting, which happened. But of course, that did not happen. But by and large, speaking about the present conversation that lasted for almost 32 minutes, three top things were in focus. One, of course, on the issue of trade. Trade has been something that has been dominating the talks between the Americans and the Indians. Second, on the issue of what the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan has been saying, we know there is no mention in the Indian government's readout, but there is a mention, the fact that there is anti-India violence by certain leaders in the region, which is not conducive for peace, which clearly talks, without taking names, means the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan. We know that he has been tweeting like a troll on Twitter about the Indian leadership and has been calling names. The third most important thing was the mention of Afghanistan. Well, this is important because we know that the region is seeing a lot of developments, and the Afghan peace process is something that has been the top of the mind of everyone in the region. And we know that the Afghan peace process is now towards its final stages. We know that there has been an 8th round of talks between the American side and the Taliban. The US Special Envoy Zalmik was in the region, and of course he visited New Delhi as well. That was his third visit this year in New Delhi. India has a major role in Afghanistan. India has been a key development partner, the largest donor in the region to Afghanistan. And of course, we know that India has been responsible for building a lot of infrastructure projects in the landlocked South Asian countries, whether it's the India-Afghanistan Friendship Dam or it's the Afghan Parliament. So India has a key role to play, a key stakeholder, which has been recognized by the Americans themselves. And India has been talking with other partners in the region as well, whether it's the Russians, whether it's the Chinese, Central Asian countries. But of course, the big worry remains Pakistan, its destabilizing role in the region. That has been the cause of worry for the entire region. We know that only on Saturday, there was a major terror attack in Kabul in which more than 60 people were died, and thereafter we saw the Islamic State coming out with a statement in which there was a mention of the name, the person whose origin is from Pakistan. Of course, Pakistan remaining in a denial mode, coming out with a statement saying that they have no role to play. But the Afghans are talking about the Pakistanis, the Indians are talking about the Pakistanis. In fact, the Iranians are also talking about the Pakistanis. So that becomes a big worry. So that is why this conversation coming at a crucial moment in, of course, the South Asian region where there are a lot of developments and turmoil which is happening.
And Siddhant, it's a continuation in a sense, as admitted, that it's a continuation of the conversation that began at the G20 summit in Osaka in Japan, especially when it comes to trade, because the US representative of trade and Indian representative are set to meet now.
Well, Well, trade has been something that has been a cause of worry for the Indian side, majorly because we know that the US president is, when it comes to trade issue, he has been very vocal about whether it's the Chinese, whether it's the Indians. We know China is already facing the brunt of Washington when it comes to trade issues. But when it comes to India also, it's not a good story to tell. We know that the US president has been calling India names, including India being a tariff king. So we know the pressure on the Indians as well, and there have been talks as well. We know that after the Osaka meeting, there were conversations here in Delhi, and that nothing came out from that conversation. We also know that the Indian Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is expected to visit Washington for the next round of talks. So nothing happening on those talks, and we know that the Americans have also removed the special privileges they have been providing to developing countries, including India, just few months ago.
Right.
That was, of course, taken up by the Indian side with a package. They were willing to give a package to the Americans. So by and large, the conversation coming at a very, very crucial time for the region and for both India and Pakistan.
Our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibal joining us as the news breaks here on WION World is One. Siddhant, clearly trade is one end of the discussion and the other end is clearly geopolitics, because one is the fact that India is dealing with the Kashmir situation right now. And at the same time you're seeing so much of misinformation being spread by Pakistan, and in that sense this is also keeping in touch regularly with the US and not letting a conversation in Osaka fall by the wayside.
Well, yes, and who knows that the Indian Prime Minister might meet the US President Donald Trump in France in just few days from now, because remember, the Indian Prime Minister is going to France for a bilateral visit and also to participate at the G7 summit. Remember, India has been invited after a gap of 10 years for this G7 summit, which will be taking place in France at the invitation of the French government. The last time India was invited was in 2005 when the then Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was invited by the then Prime Minister of Britain, Tony Blair. So this time also, this is a historic meet and, of course, an invitation to a...
Siddhant Sibal joining us on this broadcast, even as we bring you breaking news on a 30-minute conversation between India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump. It's interesting to note that the Afghanistan embassy has also called out the Pakistani envoy's assertions that Pakistan could redeploy its troops from its border with Afghanistan to its border with India in the east. The Afghan ambassador says that there is no threat from Afghanistan to Pakistan and that there is no reason for Pakistan to station its soldiers at the border with Afghanistan. We have Mr. Vivek Kajju now joining us on the broadcast. Mr. Vivek Kajju, a 30-minute-long conversation of huge importance between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump.
Of course it's important, but we don't have details. We just have, as of now, what the Prime Minister told him about the bilateral dialogue with Pakistan. And it's clear that the Prime Minister reiterated India's traditional position that dialogue, yes, but only when there is the right atmosphere, and that atmosphere can only be when Pakistan stops cross-border terror and does not incite violence. I think those are the words used in the statement or the comment by India. But what we would have to await is what are the Americans saying about this conversation? What did Donald Trump tell Prime Minister? So that we'll all have to await further details.
Right. Fair enough. We will have to await details on what exactly Mr. Trump had to say. But at the end of the day, this is a strong statement from India through its Prime Minister and continuing a conversation that was begun in Osaka at the G20 summit.
Well, that's not unusual. I think the Prime Minister is amongst the world's foremost leaders. He is the leader of one of the world's most important countries today, and therefore such consultations between important leaders take place. But we have to bear in mind that not so long ago, Donald Trump made this offer of mediation between India and Pakistan in somewhat graphic language. And India swiftly repudiated that offer and also said that no such that India had, and the Prime Minister had certainly not raised whatever Donald Trump claimed that the Prime Minister had said. So that has to be taken into account. After the Imran Khan conversation with Donald Trump, the Americans put out a statement saying that India and Pakistan have to resolve their issues bilaterally. So it would seem to me that is the formal American position, but we'll really need to wait to see if the Americans sort of give details of whatever Donald Trump, or summarize what Donald Trump conveyed to the Prime Minister. So that would be also interesting.
Certainly, sir. Mr. Vivek Karju joining us on the phone line from New Delhi for the story. Thank you so much, Mr. Vivek Karju, and of course our correspondent Siddhant Sibal as well. And with that, we take a very short breather here on the news on WION World. We're going to wrap here on 5, but we'll be back with top stories on the other side.